And God is so good. He is so good. And I'm glad to be here with you to be able to share God's word. Last week, if you missed it, we had Guillaume here and he shared his story. He shared a testimony. And I'm going to do a little bit of that today too. I want to share some of my personal testimony because it relates to how our church started. And so it's our birthday, and you know, like when you're having kids, sometimes you like to celebrate, like, man, remember when we thought about having a kid? And now, wow, we've got 6 kids. Oh my goodness, maybe we thought about it too much. But I kind of want to share some stories, and we'll have lots of good Bible teaching. But my story really starts with some kind of a dissatisfaction. Like I knew that there was something that I wanted to just be closer to God. I wanted to do more. Anybody ever, can you relate to that? Like you just want a little bit more of him. You want to be closer to him. You feel like maybe there's something he's calling you into that you haven't done yet. And I felt that way for a very, very long time. I knew that the Lord had called me into ministry. And at the beginning of 2020, I was visiting Hawaii, doing some work out there. And I was sitting at the beach. And if you've ever wanted to just talk to God, being at the beach is a great place to go talk to God. Because man, it's nice. So I'm sitting at the beach. I'm talking to God. And he gives me this word. He just lays it on me. And he says, start paddling. And I knew immediately what it meant. And so if you're not familiar with the ocean, most of you probably are, but if you're not familiar with the ocean, when waves come, they always come in sets. So they come in 2s or 3s or 4s, or sometimes you'll have big swells and they'll last for days. But surfers are always looking for the swells. They always want to find when the swell's coming because they want to catch the waves. And you have really, when you're catching waves, if you don't catch it, it's because of one of 2 reasons. The first reason is because you're too far ahead of it. And if you're too far ahead of the wave, you're not in a good position, the wave's gonna roll up, and then what's gonna happen? It's gonna smash you. The wave is just gonna roll you, and you're caught up in the wake of it, it's gonna smash you all the way to the shore. But if you're behind the wave, what you're gonna feel is the wave raise up, and it's gonna pass you. And you're gonna watch this beautiful rite go all the way to the shore that you just missed. But see, there's one thing that you can do when you see a wave coming. There's one thing that you can do to actually catch the wave, move with it, have this amazing experience, and enjoy it. And that's start paddling. You have to paddle. You have to paddle. Because the wave is gonna come whether you want it to or not. You don't control the wave. You can't tell the wave to stop. You can't make it bigger. You can't make it smaller. And here's the thing. Surfers are always checking surf reports because once you get that wave, once that wave comes and passes, it's never gonna be there again. If you miss that wave, you will never get a chance to relive it. It's gone forever. And sometimes it's flat for days. But I knew that the Lord had told me, Jake, you gotta start paddling. And I knew what it meant. I knew that by the end of the year, that there was gonna be some dramatic changes in my life to what God was calling me to do. I didn't know exactly what it was gonna look like. In fact, I had no idea what it was gonna look like. But I knew that I had to be moving in the direction of what God was doing if I wanted to catch what it was that he was gonna bring. Amen? So I'm gonna share just a little bit about that. In fact, I think that, all of us, we wanna see big things happen in our lives. We all wanna see God move powerfully, don't we? Like we don't just serve this God who's kind of a deity we just talk to in the sky and he's not relational. If you read the Bible, if you read this thing, there's amazing, powerful, crazy stories of stuff that happens all the time through people who love the Lord and follow him. And so you can't read this book and come away thinking like, oh, I'm just supposed to pray every once in a while and go to church and sit in rows and sing songs at a screen and hear some guy shout at me for an hour. Like you don't think that when you read this book. You think there's some really good stuff that I'm supposed to be experiencing. And that's really what I wanted to experience myself. But I'm gonna tell you, position matters and also posture matters. The posture of your heart matters. You gotta be leaning in if you want to experience some of the things that God's doing. You gotta be leaning towards him. And I'll tell you, my heart posture has not always been good. Some of you can relate to that. There are times where you actually just don't even want the wave. You know there's a wave coming, and you're like, I actually don't care. I know that there's cool stuff happening. It's just not for me right now. I know maybe God wants me to walk in it. I'm just not gonna do it. And sometimes my heart has been there. But I think that none of us, if I really asked you, would say you want to be there. We want to be inspired. We want to be moved. And we see things like, most of you have probably seen Asbury. You know, there was this great big thing that's been happening at this college campus. There's tons of people that just showed up for 2 weeks straight. They had a worship service, and a little chapel service that just continued for 14 days. That's pretty awesome. I think most of us are like, that's great. I would love that if that happened in my church. That would be so cool. But we gotta exercise our faith. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, then it atrophies. And so the more we use our faith, the more we engage our faith, the more it's able to take us places. So like I said, a lot of our faith journey has to do with our posture. And I remember my high school football coach told me a story that I've always remembered about two boys that exhibited, I think, the best display of posture that I've ever heard. So there was these two boys, Jimmy and Johnny, we'll call them, and they're twins, identical in every way. The only difference between them is that one of them was an optimist and the other one was a pessimist. So some therapists put them in two different rooms with two different sets of stuff. In the one room with the pessimist, they filled it with all the best toys you could ever think of. Legos, Nintendos, PlayStations, anything that you could want as a kid, it's there. And the optimist, they put him in a room filled with horse manure from the floor to the ceiling and a shovel. That's it. So they leave him there for a couple hours. They go back and they see little Jimmy and they observe him. And they open the door and Jimmy is bawling his eyes out. He's crying. He's mad. Half the toys are broken. Like, what's the matter? He's like, this toy isn't the right color. You got me these Legos. It's not the right kind of Lego set. And this Nintendo is great, but it's not even the kind of games that I like. Why didn't you get me this other gaming system? And they're like, interesting. They close the door and let little Jimmy have his time. They go over to Johnny's room and they open the door to find Johnny covered in horse manure, sweating. And he is shoveling. Man, he's just shoveling. He's throwing horse manure all over the room. And they ask, they get him to stop. They're like, hey, Johnny, what are you doing? He said, well, mister, I figure with all this poop, there has got to be a pony in here somewhere. And I'm gonna tell you, that story typifies the posture that I think that we need to have. Like, there are some times where we get some stuff thrown at us, and it's rough, but you gotta find the pony sometimes. You just gotta find the pony because there's lots of messes, but God's always doing something special. And there's two characters that I think would typify these two boys in the Bible. The first one, the first boy, the pessimist, might be Jonah. He's kind of a Debbie Downer, woe is me. Oh, you're gonna make me go to these people and see them all get saved. Oh my goodness. That's the first boy. The second boy though, he's the one that I think we need to learn from when we wanna lean in, when we wanna catch a wave, when we wanna experience something powerful. That's Peter. And he's a guy that I've taken some lessons from. And the story of Peter here that I wanna share today is one that I think we can pull some just good lessons from. So let's read it. It's in Matthew chapter 14, verse 22 through 33. And it says this: immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. So this is right after the feeding of the 5,000. Okay, so the immediately comes immediately after this crazy big thing just happened. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. Wow. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it's me, don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replies, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. And Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and he began to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. That's a really cool story, and probably most of you have heard it. And these stories of powerful things happening with God's people, they kind of follow a common arc. You've got something amazing happens, and then there's a potential catastrophe, And then Jesus shows up and faith gets challenged. Like they always sort of follow this common arc. It's really neat. And so I started with this idea that we all want to see God move in amazing ways. And Peter experienced an amazing move of God. He got to see 5,000 fed, and he got to walk on water. Now, granted, the wave rolled him later on, but he got to walk on water. That's pretty amazing. So from this arc, I just want to pull out some lessons that we can learn that we would not miss the things that God is doing, that we would not miss those opportunities that he puts before us to walk with him on the water, to do powerful things. The first thing that I think we need to do is we got to ask the question. We got to lean in. Our posture has to be right. So you got to ask God, do you want me to get out of the boat? If you read this story, you probably heard it so many times that it just sort of goes in one ear and out the other. This is scary story stuff. I don't know if any of you like horror movies. I hate them because I used to be spooky when I was a kid, and they spook me out too much. My wife loved them when we first started dating. But this is a scary story, okay? This isn't like peaceful Jesus walking on the water to them. It's dark. There's no cities. There's no ambient light. There's a storm brewing. You can't see anything. It's probably overcast. And just before dawn, you see this figure walking. You're way out to sea now. You see this figure walking to you. Maybe there's some moonlight that you can see him that's breaking through the clouds. He's in a robe. That's gonna scare you, y'all. That's scary. I'm sorry. And 11 of them were smart. They were like, that's a ghost, y'all. And he's like, no, I'm Jesus. And I would say, that's something a ghost would say. No, there's no way. But Peter had the audacity to ask a crazy question. When nobody else saw what was actually happening, Peter's posture was bent in such a way that he just wanted to be where Jesus was. He saw the powerful things that God had done when he fed the 5,000. He saw that and he was like, well, if that's Jesus, I want to be where he is. I don't want to be in this boat with all you losers. I want to go where Jesus is. And so he asks a crazy question. How many people would ask a ghost, tell me to come walk to you? Think about that. But see, so often, when we're in the middle of a storm, we don't even think to look to see where Jesus is and what he is doing. We just think this is just a storm. I just got to sit in the boat and just gut it out. I'm going to hold on to the sides and hopefully it'll be over soon. I knew at the beginning of 2020 that God was sending a wave my way. I knew that there was something cool that was going to happen. And my story arc followed the same story arc of this story to some degree. There were some amazing things that were happening. I was a defense contractor. I had a great job. I was a vice president. I had a contract with this guy where he had said, look, if you work for me for a couple years, then I will, whatever our company does, I'll give you half of it for free. You can just have it. I'm like, that's amazing. I'm going to pray that God really blesses this company. And he did. We were doing fantastic. We were winning contracts. In fact, we just won a $20 million contract at the beginning of 2020. So my thought was, this is great. God's going to use this as an opportunity. He's going to support our family. He's going to use this as an opportunity for me to just not have to take an income, and I can just help a church grow and serve people. Don't have to get paid. It's going to be awesome. Additionally, I got introduced to this guy named Michael Fletcher. And it was in March. I went down to a shoot with my lead pastor at the time from a church in Fredericksburg. He introduced me to him and said, hey, this is Jake. I would love it if he stuck around at our church and became the pastor there. But, I feel like he's probably ready right now, and I'm going to be here for another 8 years. So what I would love is if you guys talk to him, and we have a base near us, and why don't you talk to him about planting a church? Because if you know Manna, we plant near military bases. That's one of the things we do. We're not a military church, but we're a church that has a heart for military people. So I talked to Michael. It sounded really cool, and I'm like, maybe this is the wave. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is what God is doing. So amazing things. I'm like, this is kind of cool. Michael's like, why don't you come and spend a year with us? We have this residency. It's unpaid. It's, but your work situation sounds like you can kind of work from anywhere. So come be with us. I'm like, great. 2 days later, the pandemic hit. Shut down travel. And I stopped thinking about momentum and waves, and I started thinking about masks and toilet paper. And the amazing turned into potential catastrophe much quicker because I had left all my money in the company. I hadn't taken really any money out. And so I told the owner, I was like, hey, since things are getting crazy, I'm gonna start getting paid now. And we're doing really well, and we're getting kind of close to the time where you give me half the company. And he was like, yeah, effective immediately, your contract is terminated. What? You can't do that. That's illegal. I have 6 kids. You're supposed to be a Christian. He was like, yeah, sue me. Literally. So all of my plans, all of the great things that were happening, just catastrophe. So I'm wondering, like, our waves don't look like surfing waves. It looks like the storm that Peter was in now. It's scary now. Now, this is a scary story that I'm living right now. Trying to figure out how to feed my wife and my 6 kids. And she don't eat much, but they do. And it was very, very, very frightening. Had no idea what I could do. Started putting my resume out, had a couple hits, had some interviews, but nothing was really moving the right way. Everything just seemed upside down. It didn't seem like Jesus was in all this. It just seemed like the devil. That's really what it felt like. And I got a call from a guy who said, hey, I've got an opportunity. I heard you're available. I'd love to talk to you about it. And I was like, okay. Because we're getting to the point where we're trying to figure out how to buy groceries now. And so, I had liquidated my 401k. I put my house on forbearance. I'm just being real with y'all, okay? Can I do that? Is that good? Yeah, so, we were trying to figure out month to month how we're gonna take care of things. And I had this guy call me, and he goes, listen, got a job opportunity for you. We talked. Second interview comes around. He goes, here's the deal. I'm gonna give you an offer. The best we can do, though, is $200 an hour. Now, some of y'all might make way more than that, but I did not make that much money, okay? And I was like, I was doing the math in my head, and of course, I'm trying to play cool. I'm like, okay. He's like, but here's the deal. If that's not enough, we can let you bill as many hours as you want, more than full time, so you can make, maybe it'll be closer to like $300 an hour. I'm like, okay, And he's like, but if that's not enough, here's what we can do. We'll let you hire a couple contractors to work for your company, because I know you formed a company, so you can hire some contractors, and we'll let you bill them and charge about $50 an hour more for each one of them. So you can make basically like $400 an hour. I'm going, oh, wow. So I go home. I talk to Danielle. Her jaw just drops. This seems like a potential answer to prayer. And I'm gonna tell you, this is the moment for us. This was the tipping point for us that I felt. I knew this was a wave I would never see again if I made the wrong choice. And she said, so what are you gonna tell him? She said, you don't seem excited. And I looked at her and I said, I feel like it's a trap. She said, what? I said, I think a year from now, our house will be paid off, because this was like multiples more than anything we'd ever made. I think our house will be paid off. I think we'll have an RV. I think that our kids' college will be mostly paid for. And I think we will be miserable because we will have missed what it is that God is doing, and it will never come again. It will never, ever happen again. I wish my wife could be here today, because she normally sits right there. She's in the hospital. She got admitted last night to the ER. It's what the devil does. He tries to mess stuff up. She's okay. She's fine. But man, to her credit, in that moment, being a mom, wanting to provide for her kids too, she looked at me and she said, then tell him no. I said, are you sure? She said, yes. So I called the guy and I said, look, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think I'm your guy. I think you should find somebody else. Good luck. I wish you the best. And then I called Michael Fletcher and I said, hey, tell me about this unpaid residency that I have to drive to Fayetteville for 2 days a week. And, yeah. And maybe at some point in the future, I go into ministry. No promise with you guys, no promise with anything else. Let's see. He's like, man, that would be great. Come on down. And see, the thing is to have faith in these kinds of situations, to be able to see Jesus and not see the storm, you gotta read it in scripture. You gotta see it modeled from people like Peter. You've gotta see how he chased after Jesus in that moment. If you're not in the word, you're not gonna know what to look for. It's one of the reasons I love how we do the Rock here, because we hear all these testimonies about amazing stories from people all over the world who are making it hard to go to hell everywhere. And we gotta see that thing, we gotta see that modeled. Because the reality is, God is the God of second chances. He loves us, but he is not always the God of second opportunities. Hear me, church. Second chances, yes. Second opportunities, not always. I'm gonna tell you, is there anybody else you're gonna meet in heaven that walked on water with Jesus? Not that I know of. It only happened one time. That wave came, Peter was paddling, everybody else saw the wave, were like, nope, and they let it go. Second opportunities do not always come around. And here's the deal. I don't want to miscommunicate. His affections for you will never change. He will forgive anything, any offense that you commit. His heart is turned towards you. You cannot sin so far that he's not going to run after you because he loves you. But that doesn't mean that you get do-overs. You don't always get do-overs. And I knew I wasn't going to get a do-over with this. It was once in a lifetime. In fact, if you look at the story of the Israelites when they were in captivity, they had this same story arc. Something amazing happens, potential catastrophe. Jesus shows up. And they didn't know him as Jesus then, but that's what was happening. They get called out of the Exodus. They get called out of Egypt. This amazing thing happens. God is feeding them in the wilderness. He's making their enemies flee before them. And then he sends the spies in to check out the promised land. And when they come back, they're like, I don't know. This is kind of crazy. This doesn't look like a good wave. This looks like a storm. These guys are huge, y'all. We're like grasshoppers in our own eyes. You know what God's response was to them? An entire generation. Not just one family, not just one person, an entire generation of his people. Instead of being conquerors, they were wanderers. For 40 years, that generation wandered in the desert and they never got a chance to go back in. In fact, what they did, they tried to go back in after Moses told them, guys, you missed your shot. God is very displeased. You didn't catch the wave. You're afraid to go in now. He was gonna drive your enemies before you. Now you're gonna wander for 40 years. And they said, well, okay, let's try to go up now. And Moses is like, no. Too late. They went up, tried to win, and they got whipped. But I love what Joshua said. That's what he said, Numbers 14:9. God intended for this to be a challenge for them. Numbers 14:9, he said, don't rebel against the Lord. This is before they decided to not go up. And don't fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. See, don't miss this part. Your struggles, the storm that you're in, it is literally sustenance for you. It is meat for you for the next trial that you're gonna face. He knew this. The enemies that are before us, they're bread for us, y'all. They're gonna feed us. So we gotta allow our faith, that's another takeaway. We gotta allow our faith to progressively build as we encounter God, as we take down giants, as we walk on water, our faith just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like that muscle, you just keep flexing it, you trust God a little bit more, a little bit more, and amazing things happen. Your trials, they're bread for you, y'all. And for me, when I look back at that moment, and I see us now in 1 year, I'm gonna tell you, that storm that I was in, that is bread for me. I eat that every day. Every day I eat that. I'm like, God, I know you're never gonna leave me. I know you're never gonna forsake me. I know that you're gonna do amazing things in Stafford. I know that you're gonna use me. I just wanna be where you are. Every single challenge we face, it just stretches us a little bit more. When we launched, we didn't have any confirmation that there would be anybody that showed up. We raised a ton of money. We sent out a ton of mailers. We trained a bunch of people. We had a bunch of people who committed and risked their own church families to come and say, yeah, we want to see this thing happen. We had no confirmation that it was going to yield any fruit other than we know who God is and he's good. That's all we knew. But we trust him. I'll say that's the third takeaway, is if you want to see amazing moves of God, don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. The other 11 in the boat never got out. I think when we are in a crazy situation, we need to be less concerned about the circumstance we're in and more concerned about the company that we have. Because when you're in trouble, your band of brothers, your circle of sisters, that's what matters. It counts. So when you're in the middle of a trial, when you're in a boat, I want to be in a boat with people who are like, okay, so where's Jesus? That ghost over there said he was Jesus. Maybe that's Jesus. Let's go chase him down. Because there's a storm I'm in and I don't know what to do. I told you today that this was my story. This is a me story. We titled our series We because every me story really is a we story. Every single one. Every single one. God knits us together in families. We read that verse today for our serve team in Psalm 68. It says he places the lonely in families. And if you're looking for a family today, if you're looking for a church family, we'd love to invite you to join us. This is a family here. It has become more and more of a family every single week as we gather. In fact, one of the things that hit me the hardest during this whole situation was, and I've never even said this to him, I don't think. It was with Josh, the guy who came up and did announcements. Josh, great dude. Most of you know him. I had some low points, not gonna lie. I mean, we were trying to figure out just how to make ends meet. It was hard. And Josh was with me one day, and he goes, Jake, hey, man, I know that this is difficult for you, but you need to understand that this isn't just about you. What? He said, this is about us. Whoa. This is about my family too. It's not just your family. If you need something, ask me, because this is part of my story too. It's not a me story. It's a we story. It's all of us together. And that's God's plan for all of us. He doesn't want any of us to go through those trials by ourselves. It's about us as a body. That's why he built us as the ecclesia, the called out ones, a church. It's plural, multiple people. He could have chosen to do it a different way, but he chose the church, believers connecting with one another. That blessed me so much. I think, talked about the story arc, something amazing, potential catastrophe, Jesus shows up and our faith gets challenged. That happened to Peter, and he sank like a rock. But I think that Peter's story was missing something critical that would have changed it. He didn't have Josh next to him. He didn't have brothers and sisters who were there with them who were like, hey man, I'm with you. I'm not gonna let you sink. I wonder what would have happened in this story. I wonder what would have happened if when Peter gets out of the boat, then Matthew was like, he's walking on water. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna get out too. And then John, and then James, and then Nathaniel. And all of a sudden, it's not just Peter on the water, it's a bunch of Jesus followers on the water together. And Jesus is like, yes, this is great. You guys are all doing this. Is your faith bolstered? Peter, in that moment, didn't have the we factor. It was me. It was with God. And that's a great place to be. But man, I wonder what would have happened if he had Danielle, who, when he said, I think I'm gonna do this, and she said, go for it. Do it. If he had Josh, who was like, man, this is about us. Let's do this. We're gonna do this together. Fourth takeaway from this story that I want us to get, if we wanna see miraculous moves of God, if we wanna catch those waves, is we gotta push past stopping points. You will feel those stopping points. In your bones, you will feel them. You will want to quit. You will want to give up. Peter did. And for a lot of reasons, I'm sure, he sank. You're gonna have those stopping points. You gotta push past them. We all have them. We all experience them. In fact, there will be people in your life who, as they are watching what you're going through, they're gonna say, that's not Jesus, that is a ghost. They're gonna tell you that. That's a ghost, Jake. Bro, how are you taking care of your family? So you can't get a regular job because you're driving to Fayetteville 2 days a week, so you can't have like a 9-to-5 job here. Is that wise? I don't know, but it's where Jesus told me to go. That's where he is. That's just where I want to be. Well, so what are you going to do? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to spend 5 days, get my online insurance salesman degree license, and I'm going to go door to door because I can do it any state that I'm in, and I'm just going to sell that and try to make ends meet and hope that God blesses me. It was the worst job I've ever had in my life, y'all. Going from, and again, I'm not trying to puff me up. This was humiliating for me. Going from being like vice president, I own my own company, like we're winning multi-million-dollar contracts, to I'm knocking on some dude's door that has like 800 cats, and he opens it up and he's like, get the blankety blank off my porch. And I'm like, bro, you put in a lead. I'm just here to like answer your lead. It was no fun. There were some big time stopping points, and I wanted to quit, but I wanted to be where Jesus was more. And I hit my lowest point one night. I was like, I don't get low very often, but I was really low. And Danielle normally doesn't have to balance me out, but this time she did. I was sitting upstairs, and she comes in, she's like, what is the matter with you? And I was like, am I an idiot? Have I just forsaken our family's stability and our livelihood? Is this a bad decision? What am I doing? She's like, Jake, what do you need to know? And I was like, honestly, I just need to know that Jesus is with me. That's it. That's all I need to know. I just need to know that I'm not doing this in something that I felt like I needed to do. I just have to know I'm following him. And she said, well, you are. He's with you. I'm like, babe, I don't know. I mean, if Jesus is there, we'll live under a bridge and we'll eat ramen cooked on a hot pot. Like, that's what I'll do if that's where Jesus tells us to go. I don't think that's what he wants for us, but that's what I'll do. So I went to sleep that night. I woke up the next morning and I read the story of Gideon. And one of the things that I'd never seen from that story, I never realized, was Gideon had already started the battle before he asked for the fleece. He didn't ask for the fleece and say, okay, now I'm gonna call all the armies and then we're gonna go to fight. The army was already assembled. It was going down. There was gonna be a war in the next day or two. He just wanted to know, are you with me? That's all he wanted to know. Like, am I doing this on my own, or did I really hear you and you really are coming with me? And so I came downstairs and I was like, babe, she's like, hold on, Jake. I want to tell you something I read this morning. I read about Gideon and how he put out a fleece, and man, I had in my mind, I've never done a fleece because I was a little arrogant, and I thought like, people that do fleeces just don't have enough faith. Just listen to God and whatever he says to do, just do it. And she goes, I think we should do a fleece. And I'm like, yeah. And I had an idea in my head, and she spoke the idea. She said, what if somebody who never messages you, what if we have somebody message you by the end of the day? And I was like, okay, yeah, but it has to be somebody who I never get messages from, and it has to be by the end of today. And she was like, yeah. And I said, so we just sat in our kitchen, held hands. It was 7:30 in the morning, and we prayed, and I said, Lord, if you want us to continue doing this, if you want us to continue pursuing a church plant, then have Mark from Kansas message me. I get 2 texts from him a year, maybe. Have him message me before the end of the day today. And we're just gonna trust you and leave it in your hands. And honestly, I just left it with God. I didn't think about it for the rest of the day. 8:32 p.m., I'm sitting on Josh's couch. Pick up my phone. I immediately remember my prayer. Mark Kerr, I have a text message from him. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I show it to Danielle. I'm like, babe, and she's like, what? I'm like, babe, we're gonna plant a church. Jesus is there. And I'm gonna tell you guys, I know it might feel like it's a me story, but it's a us story, guys. That's what God had in his heart for us. He had this church in mind. He planned to plant this church. This is not, we could not do this on our own. It's like the verse that Josh shared. Unless the Lord builds a house, the builders labor in vain. We did not build this. I did not build this for sure. God is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Amen? And listen, these are dramatic circumstances. Life is not always this dramatic. Some of y'all just came to be encouraged and celebrate a birthday, and I'm dropping all this heavy stuff on you. We're not always in the middle of a crazy storm with ghosts walking to us on the water. Not always on the verge of taking a promised land and an entire generation's fate is hanging in the balance. There are ways for each of us, though, to be leaning in every single day. For our posture to just be looking, where are you, Jesus? How can I be with you? How can I be where you are? That happens every single day. Because the reality is guys like Peter and Joshua and Caleb, they don't just wake up one day and all of a sudden become this person of dramatic faith. Doesn't work that way. It's that muscle, and it just gets stretched a little bit. And then it gets stretched a little bit more. And when it grows and heals, it's stronger. And it gets stretched more and stretched more. And before you know it, you have such strong faith and trust and confidence in a good Father who loves you. He's never going to leave you. He's never going to forsake you. He has good plans for you. He made you on purpose for a purpose. But you don't just wake up like that. It starts with some of those basic disciplines. I think about my own story, and I would have made it a lot different if I could have written it myself. It would have been way simpler. But if I would have written it, I probably would have given me the glory and not God the glory. I would have been the hero of the story, but really, he's the hero of the story. Jesus is the hero of every story. And that's really the part that we see in this arc, the story arc from Peter walking on water. Something amazing, potential catastrophe. Jesus shows up, your faith gets challenged, and then hearts are turned to worship him for his goodness. That's what we're doing today. We're celebrating our birthday. We're worshiping Jesus, y'all. That's what we're doing today. We are praising him for his goodness. It says Matthew 14:32 through 33. When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat, Peter with them, worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Our struggles, our trials, they should be meat for us. They should be bread for us. They should sustain us, and they should help us see the good God who loves us and should drive our hearts to worship him. The last thing I want us to take away from this story, and you might have missed this, is I want us to recognize that God is sovereign. Recognize that he is driving everything. Because if you didn't notice it, Jesus planned this. The story of the walking on water, Jesus planned it. So I'll just tell you, if we had a service and 5,000 people got fed miraculously, I would not send the serve team home. But that's what Jesus did. He said immediately he sent the disciples away. He fed 5,000, sends the disciples away. They're his serve team. And he dismissed the people. That's not what you do. But he was creating space. And not only did he create that space, he waited until it was super dark outside. It wasn't like he was going to call another boat either. This was his entourage. These were his people that he was traveling with. He had to go where they were going. I mean, that was the whole plan. He called them. So he had to link up with them at some point. So he planned to give them an opportunity to walk on the water with him. Think about that. If you're in a trial right now, if you're in a situation where you're like, maybe God's there, I don't know. Man, I'm telling you, God is arranging circumstances to give you these opportunities to experience him in powerful ways. I hope you have a little bit of that FOMO, that fear of missing out. I hope you have some of that, because I have that. I do not want to miss a single thing. When I make it to heaven, and I'm going to be in heaven, man, I'm going to be there with him. I'm going to worship him for eternity. And when I get there, I want him to be like, man, Jake, you took every opportunity I put in front of you. And I want that for you guys too. Because when you follow him, your life is better. He's arranging opportunities for you to do amazing things with him. And his plan might not involve you planting a church, but I will promise you this. God's plan for your life involves his church. His church is plan A. That's how he intends to advance his kingdom, is through his church. And his church isn't about one person. It's about a group of people. We're so glad that you were here on our birthday. This is Manna Church's birthday. And you know, so we have 6 kids, and I have been able to be there for the birth of all 6 of our children. And when that baby takes his first breath, man, it's such a special moment. And you guys are here as Manna Church takes its first breath. And we have prayed about it. We prayed for the potential, the lives that this church will impact, the lives that will be changed, how this community will be different. And we're just so grateful for you guys to be here.
I think my favorite part of this first year has been developing the worship team with all the people that we've got like in that lane. Starting from day one with the practices, and then going into that first launch Sunday, and then every Sunday since then there's been big improvements, and it's been fun.
I always tell people that around 8 months is where I really felt like something clicked, something changed, and we became a family. And that was really my favorite part.
I enjoy seeing the Manna kids look at the adults that are serving and setting up in the mornings and being part of that.
I like the donuts.
Whether or not you have blood relations in the body or not, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, and so together we're able to link arms. Everybody at Manna is family, and we're able to create just this beautiful impact here in Stafford. When we joined the church, I was really excited, and our family was just really excited to be a part of something. You know, we wanted to be a part of building a community, building a church, building up a body of believers that was making a difference in the local area.
The serving, not only to each other in the church, but also to the community at large, is just phenomenal. And there's such an effort and emphasis on that it really is a wonderfully giving church. And I think it brings people out of, you know, maybe some kind of silence that they've had in other churches. It kind of brings people out a little bit, and they feel comfortable belonging to the small groups or even starting their own small groups.
When I think of Manna in the future, I just think of the seats being full. When I get up on that stage and do announcements, I just always just see that picture in my mind of like, wow, one day we're going to the very back of this auditorium. I truly believe that God is going to be bringing people into our body, and it's just going to be a thriving force in Stafford and Fredericksburg and the surrounding areas. I believe God just wants to use Manna to make an impact, and it's just an honor to be part of that mission.
I was expecting it to be a lot of work. It'd take a lot to build it, but I was expecting a lot of great people and having fun.
I expected living kind of in an area of uncertainty for a while, stepping into something I had not done before.
I just see that this church is really on a roll, and I think that we're going to do a lot more for the community. The community is going to be much more aware that we're here, and they're going to want to be involved.
As I project out into the future, I just imagine looking out And not only seeing those faces from that launch team, but just seeing hundreds of different faces of people that we never knew before. And without this church, like, we wouldn't be able to impact these different people.
I know people are going to go out of Manna Stafford and plant new churches. I know we're going to have missionaries come out of the church. I know that God's going to show up in a big way in Stafford because of the effort of all involved at Manna Church. And so, man, 1 year's down, but the future is so bright that it's almost like the time's going fast because there's so much to look forward to, and we can't get to all that's coming, or we don't know how long it's going to take, but I am super excited about the future of Manna Church.